We hear a lot these days about the need to protect shoreland. That's because there's a lot at stake here. This land is valuable as property, as fish and wildlife habitat, for its scenic qualities, its recreational opportunities, and because of the vital role shoreland plays in keeping the lake healthy. It certainly is an environment worth protecting. When it comes to erosion, however, healthy shoreland does a good job of protecting itself. Although erosion is a normal and inevitable process that can be accelerated by high water or big storms, its effects are usually minimized by natural safeguards. Reeds and rushes act as breakwaters, while the interlocking roots of plants and trees bind the soil against assaults by runoff, waves, and ice. Unfortunately, in our enthusiasm to develop shoreland property, we may have weakened these natural defenses by altering or clearing vegetation. This can open the door to a host of persistent problems, including undercut or slumping banks, unsightly gullies, water clouded with muddy sediments, and the gradual loss of more and more valuable property. The good news is that the forces of erosion, both natural and man-made, are manageable. With some wise planning and a commitment to doing the job right, there are solutions that will help property owners stand firm in the battle against erosion, restore stability, and secure the valuable attributes of the shoreland environment. This property used to be covered with a dense growth of plants and trees. At some time in the past, the land was cleared of most of its native vegetation. There's no doubt that this was done because the developers saw the vegetation as an obstacle to enjoying the property. They probably reasoned that in order to create a nice view of the lake and easy access to and from the water, the plants had to go. Well, they got their view all right, but that's not all they got. Over time, erosion gullies and channels have taken shape as runoff from rain and snowmelt washes unchecked over the unprotected ground. The soil is also eroded from around the few remaining trees, exposing the roots and causing them to lean or even topple. Without a good network of plant roots to bind the earth, sections of bare soil have developed along the shore as more and more property is slumped or washed into the lake. All the fine sediments have muddied the water and destroyed the fish spawning habitat, while the unabsorbed nutrients in runoff have nourished algae, causing the water to become slimy and green. Each of these problems are warning signs of accelerated erosion. Left to itself, this situation will continue to degrade the site and diminish the value of this property. Ironically, erosion is the environment's way of seeking stability. In nature, cliffs erode and holes fill, until eventually a delicate but stable balance is reached. Any changes we introduce to the environment, whether subtle, such as creating paths along banks which channel runoff, or dramatic, such as clearing the shoreline of its protective shield of vegetation, can upset this stability, triggering significant or accelerated erosion. Not all the events which disturb this balance are man-made, however. Prolonged rains or severe storms can also cause erosion by saturating and destabilizing soil and by generating intense runoff. High water levels or storm waves can claw away at ground along the water's edge, and ice pushing against a shoreline can rework the topography like a bulldozer. Whether the causes of a specific erosion problem are natural, man-made, or both, there are a number of important reasons why a property owner should attempt to halt the erosion by stabilizing the shoreline. The most obvious is to protect the value of the land itself. Shoreline lots can command premium prices, but erosion can devalue this investment in several ways. First, by physically reducing the size of the property. Even an erosion problem that seems minor, just some persistent nibbling along the waterline, can add up to hundreds of square feet of lost property over a period of years. Secondly, erosion can destroy the value of the property by degrading its appearance. Land marked by ugly slumps, gullies, or slopes of eroding soil is attractive to no one, and this includes wildlife. The loss of birds and animals, especially game fish who cannot spawn in silty water, is yet another black mark against the property. Finally, erosion damage can lower property's value by limiting how the land can be used. For example, steep eroding banks can make it difficult to get to the water, and a lot of muddy sediments in the lake can mean no swimming or fishing. The hazards caused by erosion are the other reasons a property owner should seek a permanent solution to this problem. Loose, dangerous slopes are a threat to safety, and sedimentation is a serious threat to water quality.
Even though we aren't the ones who first developed this property and cleared off most of the native vegetation, we're the ones who are stuck with the problems. And I can't tell you how frustrating it's been watching more and more of that shoreline deteriorate over time. In just 10 years, we've gone from a nicely landscaped surface to having a lot of these really ugly bare scars and slumping dirt slopes. It's to the point now where after every big storm, I don't know what I'm going to find down here. I think the biggest disappointment is how all the erosion has affected the water quality. The turbidity is just terrible. You can't even see the bottom on most days. Not that there's anything to see, all the sunfish are gone. You can't swim or wade without churning up clouds of silt. Of course, just getting to the lake is a major undertaking. Any type of steps I try to build down to the water just erode out. I don't like the kids going anywhere near that slope. We had to do something, and not just another Band-Aid solution, because I'm fed up with battling this problem. We decided to solve it once and for all. But we also had to come up with a way to do this that wouldn't cost us an arm and a leg, and also give us an end product that looked nice, you know, something other than a bunch of old railroad ties perched along the water's edge.
Although there's no one solution that will cure every erosion problem, most good solutions have several things in common. Every project should be well planned, it should be site-specific, and tailored to meet the goals of the property owner. But there are a lot of details to consider and possibilities to weed through in order to find a design that is right for your situation. A place to start is to get some expert help. Resources for technical assistance and possible funding are local conservation agencies such as soil and water districts. Another option is to hire a private consultant who has experience designing projects of this type. With this kind of help, you should be able to find a solution that meets your needs. A time-tested and popular solution, and the one determined to be right for this site, is basic rock riprap. Paul, maybe you can tell us a little about this design and why you chose it for your property.
Well, we chose rock riprap because it's cost-effective and it'll blend well with this environment, especially after we add some vegetation. Most importantly, it works. Rock is a proven method for stabilizing slopes like this and preventing further erosion. The way it works is by first covering the slope with a filtering layer that'll hold the subsoil in place and still permit water to drain through. This is followed by an armoring layer of protective rocks. The size of the stones and the thickness of the layer varies with each site, but it must be substantial enough to withstand being disturbed by waves. The upper limit of the structure must extend above the high water mark and beyond the reach of most waves, and the lower limit must incorporate a special layer of tow protection. In this situation, trenched into the lake bed, that'll prevent the riprap from being undermined and keep it from sliding.
Once a solution has been identified, it's important to find out about any zoning laws that might influence the design and to secure the necessary permits required for construction in the shoreland area. DNR or county zoning offices can help with these matters. If the project will be more than a do-it-yourself undertaking, you can also consult with the contractor you've hired to build the project. Now, finding a good contractor will require some legwork. It is crucial that you hire someone who is both reliable and has experience building these types of projects.
A good contractor will work closely with the property owner through all phases of the project, including having pre-construction meetings to discuss the plans. Most shoreline stabilization projects aren't complicated, but like any building project, the work has to be done right, or the whole thing could fail. A reliable contractor won't use inferior or illegal materials. If someone tries to convince you to incorporate broken concrete, railroad ties, or old tires in your project, it's time to head back to the Yellow Pages. The bottom line is you're paying someone to do this work for you, so you have every right to make sure they're qualified. Check out other jobs the contractor has done. Talk to other customers to see if they're happy with the work. A good contractor will appreciate your desire to make sure your job is done right.
Paul has chosen a sound design for solving his erosion problem, gotten his permits, and found an experienced contractor. It's time to do the work. Installing rock riprap is a lot more complicated than simply dumping rocks on a slope. We've asked Mark to discuss some of the important points as the construction progresses.
Well, the first step is to prepare the slope. Now here we're using a backhoe to smooth the face by cutting and filling any eroded gullies, steep faces, and slumps in the soil. Preparing the slope also includes removing any debris like branches or downed trees. It's important that we don't create any new problems or make things worse while doing this work. Using temporary erosion controls like silt fences will help capture or minimize disturbed soil. Next, the toe area will need to be excavated. This will provide a strong foundation that'll prevent undercutting and keep the rock from sliding. The toe should be dug deep enough to match the thickness of the rock layer so that when the project is completed, the surface of the rocks will be level with either the beach or, in this case, the bed of the lake. Once the slope has been prepared, the filter layer is laid down. Now, for this project, we're using a geotextile fabric that will allow water to pass in and out, but is fine enough to prevent the underlying soil from being carried away.
Can't gravel also be used as a filter layer?
Gravel was commonly used in the past, but the fabric is specially designed for this purpose. A little gravel on top of the fabric is still a good idea because it helps hold the fabric in place and protects it from damage. After the filter layer is down, the rock armor goes on.
Let's talk a little about the rocks. How do you determine what size to use?
Well, it really depends on the wave energy that will be thrown at the rocks. Now, the rocks have to be large enough to keep from being displaced. For an inland lake this size, it's unlikely you'll ever see waves big enough to move rocks like this. But on major bodies of water like the Great Lakes, it's obvious you're going to need something with a lot more mass. That's something that a local contractor will be very familiar with.
How thick should the rock armor be?
To be effective, the rock layer needs to be at least twice as thick as the average diameter of the stones. And particular attention needs to be paid to the toe area. This must be sunk deep enough into the lake bed to prevent undermining and scouring.
And the shape of the stones?
Well, the more angular the rocks are, the better they will lock together. On the other hand, rocks with sharp corners aren't very swimmer-friendly. On a lake like this, where the waves are moderate and the swimming is important, we try to find a happy medium.
What about the slope? Does the angle of a bank affect the size or design of the structure?
You bet. To keep the rocks from sliding, the slope of the structure shouldn't be dramatic. A rise-over-run ratio of 1 to 3 is ideal. Steeper banks present a special challenge. A solution other than rock riprap may be required.
Rock riprap is just one method for stabilizing an eroding shoreline. For Paul's property and budget, it was the best choice. Other situations may call for other solutions.
When choosing an effective method of shoreline control, it's important to consider the individual site characteristics and the erosion processes occurring at the individual site. In this case, we have a tall clay steep bank that has a particular problem. The owner has constructed gabion baskets for shoreline protection. Gabion baskets are wire baskets which are filled with small stone. The baskets take the place of a single large armor stone for shoreline protection. Another option that has been used in the past are retaining walls or seawalls. For inland lakes, these are very difficult, if not impossible, to permit now, and we typically don't recommend using those. The problem with seawalls or retaining walls are that the waves erode the material at the base and they tend to fail. When bedrock is exposed, which is typically the case in the Great Lakes, retaining walls can be used. In this situation, the retaining walls are anchored directly to the bedrock, and the scour does not occur at their base. For large lakes, such as the Great Lakes, the erosion mechanisms are the same, but the wave energy is much, much higher. Because of this, the individual rock size of the riprap needs to be much larger, for instance, 1 to 2 tons each. One problem that can occur on small inland lakes are the formation of ice ridges. There's not a lot we can do to prevent ice ridges from forming, but realize that once they form, they can prevent further erosion from occurring. Rather than removing the entire ice ridge, you may want to just cut a small path through the ice ridge for access to the lake. Erosion along rivers and streams is caused by flowing water, which is an entirely different erosion mechanism. The solutions we've talked about can be adapted, but it's really important to get some good expert advice in these cases. Another method of shoreline erosion control, which is gaining in popularity, is the use of bioengineering. In bioengineering, plants and plant material make up the erosion control. Willow wattles, live stakes, and brush bundles are all examples of bioengineering techniques. And it's important to remember that not all shoreline projects require heavy equipment for construction. In some cases, in fact, it's even the norm that contractors hand place the stone. By hand placing the stone, the impacts to the shoreline are minimal during construction.
Paul's riprap is complete, but there's one final element yet to be added to his shoreline stabilization project: vegetation. And if you remember, it was the removal of native plants and trees that started all the problems in the first place.
With timely maintenance, the riprap will control our erosion for many years, but bringing back some of the native vegetation is still an important part of our plan for this shoreline. The riprap looks nice, but not as nice as vegetation. We want to take this property full circle by restoring its natural look and feel. At the same time, we hope to create some attractive habitat for wildlife, both on the land and in the water.
Vegetation can also provide a miracle cure during the early stages of shoreland erosion. On property where erosion is not so advanced, live willow stakes, biologs, and other remedial measures involving vegetation can provide low-cost, do-it-yourself remedies. And when planning new construction, remember that erosion is a naturally occurring and inevitable process. Plan for it. Make sure any structures are set back well away from steep banks or the water's edge, and leave buffers of vegetation to stabilize the soil and act as a natural erosion barrier both on land and in the water. The easiest and cheapest way to fix an erosion problem is to prevent it from occurring in the first place. This is smart preventative medicine and a fundamental best management practice for shoreland. A number of state and local agencies have worked together to produce this fact sheet outlining the best management practices for shoreline stabilization and erosion prevention. And the fact sheet is just one in a series detailing a number of the best management practices for shoreland. Now, Paul has done a great job of restoring stability and value to his property. But if the original developers here had had an understanding of information like this, they could have saved him a lot of trouble and money. Fortunately, we can correct these mistakes and keep problems like this from occurring in the future. By taking a firm stand behind these best management concepts and principles, we can prevent time from eroding the boundaries and the value of our shoreland.